Ripple's stablecoin isn't just another dollar token. In institutional payment systems, a stable settlement unit can quietly change how corridors are built. And once that happens, the role of bridge assets starts to look very different. That's where most of the XRP conversation still misses the point. A regulated stablecoin is supposed to be boring. $1 in, $1 out, predictable value, predictable redemption, predictable controls. And that's exactly why it matters. The biggest misunderstanding in crypto right now is the idea that stablecoins compete with everything else. If there's a stable dollar, the thinking goes, why would anyone still need a bridge asset like XRP? But institutions don't design systems around narratives. They design around constraints: settlement finality, liquidity availability, counterparty exposure, compliance, and cost. And in that world, the real question isn't whether a stablecoin replaces XRP. The question is, what changes when a stable settlement unit finally becomes reliable enough and regulated enough to be used inside real payment and treasury operations? That contrast is the backbone of this video. Retail demand is visible and emotional. Structural demand is invisible and mechanical. And the market often confuses the two. So we're going to walk through this simply but accurately. Who the actors are, what they optimize for, what Ripple's stable dollar actually changes, and why the combination of a regulated stablecoin and a bridge asset can increase real usage, even if retail never notices it happening. Everything here is for educational and entertainment purposes only, not financial advice. Always do your own research before making any investment decisions. If clear, no hype crypto education helps you make sense of all this. Hit like and subscribe. It tells YouTube this series is worth showing to other newcomers, and it helps me keep building it for you. Here's the gap that keeps producing bad conclusions. Retail demand shows up on charts. People buy, hold, trade, and price moves. That's the demand most people mean when they talk about XRP. Structural demand is different. It's created by system design. It exists because a corridor cannot function unless certain balances exist in the right places, at the right time, under the right controls. It's not about belief. It's about inventory. Banks never wanted to hold trapped foreign cash. The correspondent banking model forced them to, because settlement was slow and fragmented. Capital had to be pre-positioned just to ensure payments cleared. When infrastructure improves, those holdings don't always disappear. Sometimes they change form. Sometimes they concentrate into fewer, more efficient instruments. That's where stablecoins come in. Not because they're exciting, but because they change what becomes operationally efficient. Let's keep this clean. Ripple's stable dollar is designed to maintain a constant $1 value, with reserves and redemption mechanics aimed at enterprise and institutional use rather than retail trading. It's positioned to operate inside regulated boundaries, not outside them. What does that change at the system level? A stable settlement unit reduces volatility risk where volatility is unacceptable. That sounds obvious, but the second-order effects matter more. For payment companies, treasury teams, and liquidity providers, stable value enables tighter accounting, simpler risk models, and automation. It turns settlement into an operational process rather than a speculative one. And in real systems, predictability doesn't just reduce stress, it increases throughput. Once a process becomes reliable, it can be repeated, automated, and scaled. So a regulated stable dollar doesn't just add another asset. It makes more corridors viable. To understand why this still involves XRP, you have to think like a corridor builder. A corridor isn't just send money from A to B. It's an engineered pathway through liquidity, compliance checks, conversion, and final settlement. It includes on-ramps, off-ramps, market makers, and rules for failure scenarios. Every corridor has an inventory problem. To move value reliably, liquidity must already exist when the payment arrives, not tomorrow, not after reconciliation, not after a manual approval. Traditional finance solves this by pre-funding and balance sheets. It's expensive but robust. Crypto-native rails try to solve it with speed. But once institutions enter the picture, constraints return: custody, compliance, sanction screening, and operational risk management. The result is a hybrid approach: stable settlement instruments for predictability and bridge liquidity for capital efficiency. The stablecoin is not the corridor, it's one component of it. XRP's institutional role isn't the asset you hold forever. It's the asset you move through quickly, with deep liquidity and minimal friction. Bridge assets exist to reduce the cost of crossing boundaries. They minimize trapped capital by allowing value to move without pre-funding both sides of a corridor. Stablecoins can sometimes serve that role, but they work best when both sides of the flow are comfortable staying in the same unit under similar regulatory assumptions. The real world isn't that clean. Many corridors involve mismatched systems, currencies, banks, and regulatory environments. Between those endpoints, there's still an FX and liquidity routing problem. That's where XRP can sit in the middle as a neutral, fast settlement asset, especially when the goal is to compress risk windows without depending on a single institution's balance sheet. This is why RLUSD plus XRP isn't competition. It's specialization. Stable settlement units stabilize the ends. Bridge assets optimize the middle. Institutions don't pick one asset and stop thinking. They assemble stacks. In a dual asset corridor, Ripple's stable dollar can be used where stable value is required: invoicing, quoting, treasury accounting, predictable settlement legs. XRP can be used where speed and liquidity matter most: the cross-border hop, the conversion layer, the part of the flow where time and capital costs dominate. This is where spreads come into play. Spreads reflect risk, price risk, execution risk, settlement risk, and inventory risk. If a stable settlement unit reduces some of that risk, spreads tighten. When spreads tighten, corridors become usable. When corridors become usable, volume increases. At that point, demand becomes structural, not buy and hold demand, working inventory demand. Inventory that cycles because the corridor is active. That kind of demand rarely looks exciting on social media, but it tends to persist once infrastructure is live. Here's the paradox most people miss: more stability at the edges can increase movement in the middle. Reliable settlement enables automation. Automation increases frequency. Frequency increases throughput. Throughput increases the need for liquidity that can clear it. That's why it's possible, and this is about structure, not prediction, that a regulated stable dollar doesn't reduce XRP's functional role. It can expand the number of corridors where XRP becomes viable, because the surrounding system becomes institution-friendly. Think of it like modern highways. Better roads don't eliminate interchanges. They increase traffic and make interchanges more valuable. In settlement terms, stable units create reliable endpoints. Bridge assets keep value moving between them. It's concrete that Ripple positions its stable dollar as fully backed, redeemable, and integrated into its payments stack. It's concrete that institutions care about finality, risk windows, and cost, and that stable settlement units are attractive because they reduce operational uncertainty. It's also concrete that bridge assets can play a role when corridors are fragmented and require neutral, fast settlement. What's speculative is the magnitude and pace: how quickly adoption spreads, how many corridors adopt dual asset models, how regulators shape usage across jurisdictions. Those are real open questions. Anyone claiming certainty is selling a story, but the structural logic still matters. If a regulated stable dollar increases corridor viability and throughput, it can create conditions where XRP becomes more useful inside the plumbing, not as a narrative, but as a mechanical tool. The contrast we started with still holds. Retail looks for demand and price. Institutions create demand and design. A regulated stable dollar is boring by intention. It reduces uncertainty, enables automation, and fits inside real compliance frameworks. And once that exists, bridge assets don't automatically disappear. In many cases, they become easier to use. That's why RLUSD and XRP aren't best understood as rivals. They're components in a corridor stack, stable ends, fast middle, and routing that minimizes trapped capital while preserving reliability. If this is the direction finance is moving, toward tokenized money, real-time settlement, and machine-driven liquidity, then the most important signals won't be loud. They'll be structural. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next deep dive. This channel is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and is not financial advice. Always do your own research and keep the discussion respectful. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking, subscribing, leaving a comment, or sharing it with a friend.